I want to pick up where I left off. After the heartbreaking call with my parents, I was in a strange place. I felt a profound sense of loss, like a part of my foundation had crumbled. But at the same time, I felt an immense sense of relief and liberation. The secret was out. The worst had been said. I no longer had to carry the weight of that fear. I could move forward, not as a man hiding a secret, but as a woman building a new life. Chloe was my anchor. She held me as I wept. She listened to me rage against my father's words, and she was the one who gently pulled me back to focus on the practical steps ahead. "You've been through the hardest part," she would say, brushing the hair from my face. Telling them was the big one. The rest is just logistics. She was right. It wasn't just about feelings anymore, it was about action. My therapy sessions with Dr. Evans became more focused. We moved from talking about my childhood and my feelings to creating a concrete plan. She helped me understand the medical and social transition process, giving me a roadmap. The path felt long and daunting, but with each step, I felt more like myself. The most crucial and terrifying step was starting hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. This wasn't just a change in appearance, it was a fundamental change in the chemistry of my being. It was the ultimate surrender to who I truly was. The thought of it was both exhilarating and utterly petrifying. I spent weeks researching it, reading medical journals, watching countless videos from other trans women about their experiences. I read about the physical changes: softer skin, fat redistribution, breast growth, changes in body hair. But I was most interested in the psychological effects. I'd heard other women talk about a sense of peace, a feeling of finally being at home, in their own minds. I desperately wanted that. I wanted the constant low-level noise of dysphoria to finally be quiet. The day I went to the endocrinologist was a blur of anxiety. I was dressed in my neutral boy mode clothes, jeans, and a t-shirt, but I felt like a fraud walking into the gender clinic. There were other people there, other trans people, and I felt this immediate sense of kinship. It was a feeling of, oh, these are my people. They were in different stages of their journeys. Some were like me, early and nervous. Others were fully transitioned, confident and beautiful. I looked at them and saw hope. The doctor was kind and professional. He reviewed my letters from Dr. Evans, asked about my medical history, and then he wrote out my prescription. 2 small pills. Estrogen and a testosterone blocker. That was it. The keys to the kingdom. I held the prescription in my hand. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt like holding a magic wand. I looked at it and felt a surge of emotion. This was it. The beginning of the end of the old me. "I can't believe it," I whispered to Chloe as we sat in the car in the parking lot. "This is actually happening." She squeezed my hand. "It's happening. You're doing it." I filled the prescription that afternoon. The pharmacist was a kind middle-aged woman who looked at the prescription, looked at me, and simply said, "Congratulations, dear." It was such a small gesture, but it meant the world to me.
She saw me.
She knew what this meant. The first few weeks of HRT were anticlimactic. Nothing happened, or so I thought. I was looking for dramatic changes, a physical transformation overnight. But it was slower than that. Much slower. It was like watching a flower grow. You can't see it moving, but if you look at it every day, you can see the subtle changes accumulating. My skin started to feel softer. It was a small change, but I noticed it immediately when I washed my face. The texture was different, smoother, more delicate. I started to carry a little moisturizer in my bag, a habit I'd always secretly wanted to have. The emotional changes were what surprised me the most. It was like a fog had lifted from my brain. The constant hum of anxiety and depression that had been my background music for as long as I could remember began to fade. It didn't disappear entirely, but the volume was turned way down. In its place was a clarity I'd never experienced before. I started to feel things more deeply. I cried more easily, but not always from sadness. I cried at commercials. I cried at beautiful sunsets. I cried during movies. It was like my emotional bandwidth had been expanded. Before, I felt like I could only receive a few basic signals: happy, sad, angry. Now, I could feel the whole spectrum. Joy, excitement, melancholy, nostalgia, contentment. It was overwhelming sometimes, but it was also wonderful. I was finally feeling alive. One night, about a month into my HRT, I was lying in bed with Chloe. I had my head on her chest, and I could feel her heartbeat. I started to cry. It was a soft, quiet cry, and I wasn't entirely sure why. It was just an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She noticed. "Hey," she whispered. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I sniffled. I can't believe you stayed. I can't believe you're here. I was so scared you'd leave." She tilted my chin up and looked me in the eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "But I need to tell you something." My heart sank. "What?" She smiled a little nervously. "It's nothing bad. I've been thinking about us. And I realized something. The person I fell in love with, he was the mask. The person I'm actually in love with, I'm just starting to really meet her. And I'm so excited." It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever said to me. The person I was becoming was the real me, and she loved me even more for it. The changes continued. My body odor changed. It was subtle, but I could smell it on myself. I didn't smell like a man anymore. It was a softer, cleaner scent. I started to notice the first, tiny buds of breast tissue forming. It was painful, a dull, tender ache, but I loved it. I'd cut my chest at night and whisper to Chloe, "I think they're growing." She'd laugh and say, "I think they are too." I started to notice my face changing. It was subtle, but my features were softening. The hard lines that made me look so masculine were starting to blur. I had more fat in my cheeks. My eyes seemed bigger, more open. When I shaved, the shadow was less pronounced. I remember taking a selfie one morning. It was a simple, no-makeup selfie in front of the bathroom mirror. I posted it to a private account Chloe had helped me set up, where I documented my journey for a small group of supportive friends. I looked at the photo. I was still presenting as male in public, but I could see Alara peeking out. It was like looking at a negative of a photograph and seeing the positive developing right before my eyes. "I can see her," I whispered to myself. "She's in there." Part 6. Letting Go of the Mask. Music becomes more introspective, a bit melancholic about the difficulty of change. As my body started to change, a different kind of struggle began. The internal struggle was becoming manageable, but the external struggle was just beginning. I was living a double life. At home, with Chloe, I was Alara. I wore the clothes I loved, I practiced my voice, I let my hair grow. We'd have girls' nights, where we'd do face masks, watch terrible reality TV, and paint our nails. It was bliss. It was the life I was meant to have. But then I had to put on my man's suit and go to work. I'd walk out the door in my jeans and button-down shirt. I'd hide my painted nails under dark polish, or later just go without polish for work. I'd take a deep breath and step back into the role of the competent, reliable IT guy. It was getting harder and harder to do. The contrast was jarring. One Sunday evening, I was putting on my work clothes for the next day. I was standing in front of the closet, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't put on the button-down shirt. I couldn't put on the ugly, practical pants. My hands were shaking. "I can't do it, Chloe," I said, my voice cracking. "I can't pretend anymore. It feels like I'm putting on a costume to go to a job where they don't know me. The real me." Chloe came up behind me and hugged me. "Then don't," she said simply. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Come out at work," she said. "Be yourself. It's time." The thought terrified me. My workplace was a major corporation. It had a diversity policy, but that didn't mean the people who worked there were necessarily accepting. I could lose my job, my livelihood, my security. What if they fire me? I asked. What if everyone looks at me like I'm a freak? Then you deal with it, she said. But you can't keep doing this to yourself. You can't keep putting Alara in a box 5 days a week. It's destroying you. I can see it. You come home from work and you're so exhausted from pretending, you can barely talk. She was right. It was draining my soul. I realized that coming out at work wasn't just a step in my transition. It was a necessity for my mental health. We made a plan. I would talk to HR first. I would do it by the book. I'd prepare a letter, just like I had for my parents. I'd schedule a meeting with the head of HR, a woman I'd had a few professional interactions with. She seemed nice enough. The day of the meeting, I was a mess. I'd asked to meet in her office after hours, so there would be fewer people around. I wore a nice but neutral outfit. I felt like I was going to my own execution. The HR director, Amanda, was professional and polite. She invited me to sit down. "What can I do for you?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you about something personal. It's about my gender identity." I explained everything. I told her I was transgender, I was in the process of transitioning, and that I was planning to come out fully at work. I asked what the company's policy was and what the process looked like. Amanda listened without interrupting. When I was done, she smiled. "First of all, thank you for telling me," she said. "I know that was hard. The company has very clear policies against discrimination and harassment. We take this very seriously. We want you to be comfortable and to be able to do your job. We're going to support you through this." I was floored. I almost started crying right there in her office. I'd been so prepared for a fight for resistance, and instead, I got acceptance. She walked me through the process. They would send an email to my team and to the larger department announcing the change. They'd make sure I had access to the women's restroom and that the appropriate changes were made to my company records, like my email address and name in the directory. They told me I could take a few days off around the coming out day if I needed to. "I'm so happy for you," Amanda said as I was leaving. "I know this is a big change. If anyone gives you any trouble, you come to me. We'll deal with it." I walked out of her office feeling like I was floating. I couldn't believe it. I had one of my biggest fears, the fear of losing my job, and it had been replaced by acceptance and support. I called Chloe immediately and told her the good news. She was overjoyed. We set a date. The email would go out on a Wednesday morning. I took the rest of the week off. That Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep. The next day, everyone I worked with would know. There was no going back. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I took the day off, but I stayed glued to my phone, waiting. At 9 a.m., I got the email. It was from Amanda. It was gentle and professional. It simply said, "To all team members, I want to announce that our colleague, birth name, will be transitioning. Please refer to her as Alara and use she/her pronouns. We are committed to creating a supportive and inclusive workplace, and we expect everyone to be respectful. Please welcome Alara when she returns." I read it 5 times, then 10 times. I couldn't believe it was real. Then my phone started to buzz. Emails started pouring in. "Hi Alara, congratulations. Welcome to the team, really. So happy for you. Mark," that was my office friend Mark, different from my friend Mark, "Alara, I love the name. Can't wait to see you back. Let me know if you need anything. Sarah, from accounting. Thank you for your courage, Alara. Jenna. There were dozens of them. Some were short, a simple congratulations. Others were longer, more personal. People shared their own struggles, their own stories of being different. It was a flood of support. I was weeping. Tears of joy, tears of relief. All that fear, all that worry, and my colleagues were embracing me. One email stood out. It was from a guy named Brian, who I'd always thought was kind of a jerk. He was a loud, opinionated guy, the kind I'd always been scared of. His email just said, "Alara, I gotta be honest, I don't really get this whole transgender thing. But I see you're happy, and I know the person I worked with before was never this happy. So, good for you. I'll try to remember the new name. Brian." It was probably the most touching email I got. He didn't understand it, but he saw my happiness and he respected that. That was the moment I knew I'd made the right decision. I had taken the biggest step in my social transition, and the world hadn't ended. It had welcomed me with open arms. Part 7. The Evolution of a Relationship. Music becomes more romantic and tender, mixed with moments of deep reflection. My transition wasn't just my journey, it was Chloe's journey too. Our relationship was changing and evolving in ways neither of us could have predicted. When we first got together, Chloe was in a heterosexual relationship with a man. Now, she was in a lesbian relationship with a woman. That was a huge shift for her. We talked about it a lot in the early months. How do you see yourself? I asked her one night. Are you still straight? Does this make you bisexual? Lesbian? Chloe thought about it for a long time. Labels are tricky, she said. I'm me. I fell in love with you. The person I fell in love with was always Alara, even if neither of us knew it. So I guess that makes me someone who loves you. I don't really care about the label. All I know is that I love you more than I ever loved the man I was pretending to be with. Her answer was profound. She wasn't attached to a label. She was attached to me. Her love was so strong that it transcended the boundaries of traditional orientation. But that's not to say it was easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments of grief for the person she thought she was with. I remember being scared about the future, she told me once. I kept thinking, is this going to change everything? Are we still going to be compatible? What if I don't like the person she becomes? But then I realized, the person you were becoming was the person I'd been trying to get to know for years. The person I was falling in love with was the person you were too scared to show me. She mourned the person she had fallen in love with in a way, but she also celebrated the person I was becoming. There was a period of adjustment. We had to relearn each other. Our dynamic shifted. I wasn't the man in the relationship anymore, and we had to figure out what that meant. For example, we used to have a very traditional gender dynamic when it came to things like decision-making and emotional support. I was the strong one, the logical one who didn't show emotions. She was the emotional one. This was partly a product of my performance of masculinity. After my transition, all of that changed. I started to show my emotions more openly. I'd cry when I was sad, which confused her at first. Are you crying? She'd ask, shocked. Yeah, I'd say. I'm sad. This is what people do when they're sad. We had to learn a new kind of intimacy. Physical intimacy was a big part of that. I was becoming more comfortable in my body, and I was exploring my sexuality in a new way. Sex was no longer a performance. It was an expression of connection and love. We had to learn how to be intimate all over again. I remember her saying, it was like dating a brand new person. But it was exciting. I was falling in love with you all over again. Another big challenge was our relationship dynamic in public. We'd been a straight couple for 3 years. People saw us as a man and a woman. Now people saw us as 2 women. We would get looks. Sometimes someone would stare. When we held hands in public, it was a political statement. Before, it was just a couple holding hands. There was a loss of privilege there that we had to navigate. We were now a visible, queer couple. I felt the weight of that. I felt responsible for putting Chloe in a situation where she might be judged or harassed just for being with me. I'm sorry, I said to her once, after a particularly rude stare from a man on the street. Don't apologize, she said firmly. They're the ones with the problem, not us. I knew what I was signing up for. I'd rather have this, and be with you, than have it easy and be with someone else. Our relationship became one of the most beautiful things in my life. It was a testament to the power of love. We weren't just partners, we were a team. We were navigating this huge life change together. Chloe wasn't just a supportive partner, she was a co-conspirator in my liberation. She was the one who helped me find the courage to be myself. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I could not have done it without her. I wouldn't have even tried. Part 8. The Long Road Home. Music becomes poignant, focusing on family and reconciliation. The one piece of my life that was still shattered was my relationship with my parents. The silence between us was deafening. Months had passed since the disastrous phone call, and I hadn't heard a word from them. It hurt, more than I could ever articulate. I'd call, and they wouldn't answer. I'd send emails, and they wouldn't respond. It was like I had ceased to exist. The pain of their rejection was a constant ache in my heart. They had been my first teachers, my protectors, my foundation. Their love was supposed to be unconditional, and it felt like they had just thrown me away. It was a grief that was as profound as a death, but there was no funeral, no closure. Just silence. Chloe would tell me, they just need time. Their whole worldview has been shaken. Give them space to catch up. But I didn't know how much space to give them. I didn't know if there was a limit. I didn't want to lose them forever. I wanted my parents back. I wanted them to know their daughter. Eventually, after about 6 months, I sent a letter. A long, handwritten letter. I poured my heart into it. I told them about my journey, the pain, the shame, and the joy I was finally discovering. I told them about my job, how supportive they were, how my friends had accepted me. I told them I was happy. I told them I loved them and that I wanted them to be a part of my life. But I also made it clear that I wasn't going to change my mind. This was who I was. I was Alara. I didn't expect a reply. I braced myself for more silence. 2 weeks later, I got an email from my mother. It was short. It said, *, we've been thinking about what you said in your letter. We don't understand it. We don't like it. But we love you. You're our child. We want you in our lives. We're not ready to see you yet. We need more time. But we're thinking about you, Mom. *. It was a crack in the wall. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. They still didn't approve, but they hadn't cut me off entirely. They'd left the door open, just a tiny sliver. I cried when I read it. It was a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that they still loved me, sadness that they couldn't accept me for who I was. About a year later, after I'd been living full-time as Alara for a while, my mother called. Out of the blue. Hello. I answered, my heart in my throat. Alara? Her voice was hesitant, shaky. It's Mom. My breath caught. Mom, I wanted to hear your voice, she said. Your real voice. I'd been working on my voice, trying to make it more feminine. It wasn't perfect, but it was different from the voice she was used to. I spoke to her softly. How are you? She cried. She told me that my father was struggling, that he was having a hard time understanding. But she said she missed me. She said she missed having her child in her life. The conversation was awkward and painful. There were long silences. But we talked for an hour. She asked me questions. What's your job like? Do you have any nice friends? Are you happy? Of course I'm happy, I said. I've never been happier. She sighed. Your father's not ready to talk to you yet. But I thought I could try. That was a breakthrough. My mother, the woman who was terrified of what the neighbors would think, had reached out to me. She was trying. She was putting her love for me above her fear of judgment. It would be another year before I saw them in person. We met at a neutral location, a restaurant far from their hometown. I was a nervous wreck. I didn't know what to expect. I wore a simple floral dress. My makeup was subtle. I looked like any other woman. When I walked in, my mother saw me first. She looked at me, this stranger in a dress, and I saw her eyes well up with tears. She stood up awkwardly. Alara, she whispered. I nodded. Hi, Mom. She came over and hugged me. It was a stiff, awkward hug, but it was a hug. It was the first time she'd held me in 2 years. My father didn't stand. He stared at me, his face unreadable. He looked me up and down. I could see the confusion, the pain, in his eyes. Hello, Alara, he finally said, the name sounding foreign on his tongue. He nodded stiffly. He didn't hug me. The lunch was awkward. My mother was trying so hard. My father was mostly silent, but they were there. They were present. They were trying. As we were leaving, my mother took my hand. You look beautiful, she said softly. You really do. It was a tiny moment, but it meant the world to me. It was a step forward. A tiny, hesitant step, but a step nonetheless. The door was open a little wider. Part 9. Finding my voice. Music becomes more uplifting, a fanfare of self-discovery. One of the most significant parts of my transition, beyond the physical changes, was finding my voice. And I don't just mean my speaking voice, though that was a huge part of it. I mean finding my metaphorical voice, my confidence, my place in the world. When I was living as a man, I was quiet. I was a background character in my own life. I was afraid to take up space. I was afraid to have opinions that weren't agreeable. I was afraid to be seen. Becoming Alara changed all of that. It was like I'd been holding my breath underwater my entire life, and I was finally allowed to surface and take a deep, life-giving breath. I could speak. I could have opinions. I could be loud and passionate and angry and joyful. I didn't have to filter myself through the lens of what a man should be. The voice training was a journey in itself. It's something a lot of trans women don't talk about enough because it's so hard. It requires daily practice, discipline, and a lot of patience. It's not just about pitch. It's about resonance, inflection, and speech patterns. I had spent my whole life speaking from my chest, with a deep, resonant male voice. I had to learn to speak from my head, to use my nasal passages to lighten the sound. I worked with a speech therapist. She was a wonderful, patient woman who understood the unique challenges trans women face. We would do exercises together, humming, reading passages, practicing my customer service voice. It felt silly at first, but it worked. My voice was my biggest source of anxiety. I told Chloe one night. I'd be out in public and I'd look like a woman, but as soon as I opened my mouth, people would look at me with that confused expression. I could practically hear them thinking, why does that woman have a man's voice? It made me feel so exposed. It made me feel like a fraud. Chloe listened. I know it's hard, she said, but you're getting there. Your voice is getting softer. It's getting more and more beautiful. It sounds like you. She was right. The more I practiced, the more comfortable I became. My voice started to feel like mine. It stopped feeling like a performance and started feeling like a natural extension of who I was. I remember the first time I was clocked in public. I was at a coffee shop, waiting for my latte. The barista, a young guy with a kind face, called out, "Alara?" I went to pick up my coffee. He looked at me, and I could see him processing. He'd heard my name. He'd seen my face. But my voice, which was still a little shaky, must have been at odds with what he was expecting. He paused. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. But then he just smiled and said, "Here you go, ma'am." He called me ma'am. He'd been confused for a second, but he defaulted to my presentation. That small gesture of respect, of seeing me as I was, made my whole day. The more I practiced, and the more I was myself, the less I cared about passing. Passing was about survival, about trying to blend in and avoid harassment. But eventually I realized that it was more important to be authentic than to be invisible. I'd rather be a visible trans woman who is happy and confident than a perfect woman who is still scared and hiding. Part 10. Becoming who I always was. Music swells to a triumphant, yet gentle, crescendo. So, here I am now. Alara. I'm a woman. I've been on HRT for a few years. I've had some surgeries, including facial feminization surgery, which helped align my outer appearance with my inner self a little more. I'm not going to lie and say my life is perfect. It's not. I still have bad days. I still look in the mirror sometimes and see things I don't like. I still have moments of sadness and self-doubt. I still think about my father, who is still struggling to accept me. He's trying. He'll call me on my birthday and use my name, but it's still awkward. He still struggles to use she. It's a process. I know that now, but the difference is staggering. The person I used to be, the quiet, sad, anxious man, he's gone. I'm not sad for him anymore. I'm grateful for him. He fought so hard for so long and he survived. He got me through the darkest times. He kept me alive until I was ready to be myself. He's not a ghost I'm haunted by. He's the hero of a prequel chapter, the story that had to happen so my story could begin. The person I am now is loud and joyful and confident. I'm a woman who doesn't apologize for taking up space. I have a career I love, friends who adore me, and a girlfriend who is my soulmate. Chloe and I got married last year. It was a small ceremony, just our closest friends. My mom was there. She was quiet, but she was there. It was a beautiful day. I wore a white dress, not a traditional wedding dress, but a beautiful, flowing white gown that made me feel like a princess. I looked in the mirror before the ceremony, and I didn't see a man in a dress. I saw a woman. I saw Alara. And I saw the woman who loved me, standing at the end of the aisle, waiting for me. That moment, walking down the aisle, with all my friends and family watching, was the most powerful moment of my life. It wasn't just about getting married. It was about being seen. For the first time in my life, everyone was seeing the real me, and they were celebrating her. My transition was never about changing who I was. It was about shedding everything that wasn't me. It was about removing the mask, the armor, the lie. It was about letting the person inside finally come out to play. It was about becoming who I always was. If you're watching this and you're scared, I wanted to know something. I was scared too. I was more scared than I'd ever been in my life. I thought I would lose everything. And I did lose some things. I lost the idea of a traditional relationship with my parents. I lost the safety of being normal. But what I gained was immeasurable. I gained a life. A real, authentic, joyful life. I gained a body that feels like my own. I gained a voice that can speak my truth. I gained a name, Alara, that sounds like coming home. And I gained the love of a woman who saw the real me, long before I could even see her myself.